The wind on Verevka could cut through metal. It was a world of endless ice, where the sun was just a pale circle in a gray sky, and warmth was something the old ones spoke about in legends. Nothing soft survived here. Nothing weak lasted more than a few hours in the open. That was why the Draconith chose this place to raise their young. They were massive creatures, each one standing taller than a human building. Their scales were thick as armor, colored in shades of deep blue and silver that matched the frozen landscape. Their wings could block out the sky when they spread them wide. Their claws could tear through stone. Across the galaxy, other species spoke of the Draconith with fear and respect. They were ancient. They were proud. They bowed to no one. And on this day, the Seraph pack was dying inside. Vithern stood at the edge of the collapsed cave, his golden eyes fixed on the mountain of ice and broken rock that had buried everything he loved. His chest moved slowly with each breath, steam rising from his nostrils into the frozen air. Behind him, the other members of his pack waited in silence. No one spoke. There were no words for this kind of loss. 7 eggs. 7 children who would never see the light. The icequake had come without warning in the night. The ground had shaken, and the ancient nesting cave that had protected Draconith eggs for 1,000 generations had simply fallen in on itself. By the time Vithern had reached the site, there was nothing but a wall of compressed ice and stone where the entrance used to be. He had tried to dig. They all had. But the ice was packed too tight, and every time they clawed at it, more of the mountain shifted above. One wrong move and the entire structure would collapse further, crushing whatever might still be alive beneath. If anything was still alive at all. SYRLITH. His mate had not moved from her spot near the blocked entrance for 6 hours. She was smaller than Vithern, but no less powerful. Her scales were pale white, almost invisible against the snow. She had not made a sound since the collapse, and that silence was more terrible than any scream. The other pack members had tried to comfort her. She had nearly taken the arm off the first one who touched her. Now they all simply waited. Waited for the cold truth to settle in. Waited to begin the morning songs that would echo across the ice fields for days. Waited to accept that the Seraph pack would have no young this season, and perhaps never again. That was when the human appeared. Vithern smelled her before he saw her. It was a strange scent, out of place in this world of ice and scale. Warm blood. Soft flesh. Something burning, like chemical heat. He turned his great head and saw a small figure stumbling through the snow about 100 meters away. It moved slowly, struggling against the wind, wrapped in some kind of thermal suit that was clearly failing. One arm hung at a bad angle. The creature kept falling and getting back up, falling and getting back up, moving toward the pack with the desperate determination of something that knew it was about to die. Of the human. Vithern had seen humans before, though only from a distance. They were one of the younger species in the galaxy, small and fragile things with no natural weapons, no armor, no elemental abilities of any kind. Other species called them soft meat as a joke. They died easily. They broke easily. They had no business being on a world like Verevka. And yet here one was. The human female finally collapsed about 30 meters from the pack and did not get up again. She lay in the snow, her breathing visible in short, rapid clouds of steam. She was looking at the Draconith with eyes that held no fear, only exhaustion. Vithern moved toward her slowly. His footsteps made the ground shake. "You should not be here," he said. His voice was deep, rumbling like distant thunder. The translator device all spacefaring species carried would convert his words into something she could understand. "This is sacred ground. Nesting ground. Your presence is a violation of our laws." The human pushed herself up onto her elbows. Her face was red from the cold. and there was blood frozen on her forehead from some wound. "My shuttle crashed," she said. Her voice was weak but steady. "3 days ago. I have been walking since then. I saw your pack from the ridge and thought—" She coughed, a terrible wet sound. "I thought you might have shelter." "We have nothing for you," Vithern said. "Go back the way you came. I will die if I go back." "Then you will die." It was not cruelty. It was simply fact. The Draconith did not involve themselves in the problems of lesser species, especially not during nesting season. Especially not now, when their own grief was still fresh and bleeding. The human looked past Vithern toward the collapsed cave. Her eyes, strange and small and brown, seemed to focus on something. "What happened there?" she asked. "That is not your concern." The cave fell in. It was not a question. The human was studying the scene with an expression Vithern did not understand. "You had eggs inside. You cannot reach them." Vithern felt his rage rise like fire in his throat. "Do not speak of things you do not understand, small creature. Leave this place, or I will end your suffering myself." The human did something unexpected then. She reached into her damaged suit and pulled out a small device, some kind of scanner. Her fingers were shaking badly from the cold as she pointed it toward the collapsed cave. For a long moment, she stared at the screen. Then she looked up at Vithern with an expression that made him pause. "There are life signs," she said quietly. 5 of them. Faint but stable. She turned the scanner so he could see the display, though he did not understand the human symbols. "Your eggs are still alive under there." The wind howled across the ice fields. Vithern did not move. Behind him, Cyrillith lifted her head for the first time in hours. The human woman pushed herself up to her knees, then slowly, painfully, to her feet. She swayed but did not fall. "My name is Kira Dawson," she said. "I am a xenobiologist. I have training in confined space rescue and emergency extraction." She took a shaking breath. "Let me help you save your children." The words hung in the frozen air between them, impossible and strange. A human, offering to save Draconith eggs. Vithern looked at this small, broken, freezing creature standing before him in the snow, and he did not know what to say. Vithorn's answer came fast and hard. "No." The word echoed across the ice field like a crack of thunder. Several members of the pack shifted behind him, their massive forms moving in the snow. The human female, Kira, did not step back. She stood there shivering, her broken arm pressed against her side, her eyes locked on the alpha dragon. "You do not understand," Vithern continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "We do not accept help from other species. We never have. What you suggest would bring shame upon this pack for 100 generations. Your eggs will die," Kira said simply. "Then they will die with honor." "Honor." Kira repeated the word like she was tasting something bitter. "What honor is there in letting children die when they could be saved?" Vithern moved closer to her. His shadow fell over her small body completely. Up close, the size difference was almost ridiculous. He was a mountain of scale and muscle and ancient fury. She was a wounded animal barely able to stand. "You know nothing of our ways," he said. "You know nothing of what it means to be Draconith. We have survived for 10,000 years because we depend on no one. We ask for nothing. We accept nothing. This is who we are. And how many eggs have you lost in those 10,000 years because of that pride?" The question hit Vithern like a physical blow. He reared back, his wings spreading slightly, a deep rumble building in his chest. For a moment, Kira was certain he would kill her right there, but he did not. He simply turned away from her and walked back toward the collapsed cave, where Cyrillith still sat in frozen silence. "Remove this creature from our territory," he ordered the other pack members. "I do not care where you take her. Just get her away from here." Two younger dragons began moving toward Kira. Their eyes held no hatred, only a kind of tired acceptance. They were following orders. Nothing more. Kira did not run. She could not run even if she wanted to. Instead, she sank back down to her knees in the snow and spoke one last time. "I had a brother once," she said. The words were quiet, but somehow they carried across the wind. The two dragons approaching her slowed down. His name was Cadden. He was 19 years old. He worked in the mining tunnels on Colony 7, deep underground where the air was thin and the walls were always shifting. Kira's voice did not shake. It was steady, almost flat, like she was reading from a report. There was a collapse. The tunnel fell in on his team. They were trapped for 3 days. She looked up at Vithorn's back. The rescue team was delayed. There were protocols to follow, procedures. Someone decided it was too risky to dig without the proper equipment. She paused. By the time they finally went in, everyone was dead. Cadden was found 15 meters from the exit. He had been trying to dig himself out with his bare hands. The wind filled the silence. "I was 22 years old," Kira continued. "I had just finished my first degree. I remember getting the message and thinking that it could not be real, that someone had made a mistake." She shook her head slowly. "There was no mistake. My brother died because people decided that rules and protocols were more important than a life." She pushed herself back to her feet, swaying slightly. "I am not asking you to change who you are. I am not asking you to accept me as one of your pack or to owe me anything. I am asking you to let me try. Because those eggs under the ice are still alive right now, and I cannot walk away from that. I cannot watch another family lose their children when I could have done something." Vithorn still had not turned around. The other dragons stood frozen in place. Looking between their alpha and the small human female dot, it was Cyrillith, who moved first. The white dragon rose from her place by the collapsed cave and walked toward Kira with slow, deliberate steps. Her eyes were red from grief, but there was something else in them now. Something desperate and dangerous and alive. She stopped directly in front of Kira and lowered her massive head until they were almost at eye level. "You truly believe they are alive?" she asked. Her voice was softer than Vithorn's, but no less powerful. "The scanner does not lie," Kira said. 5 stable life signs. The cold has slowed their development, but they are still there. Still waiting. And you believe you can reach them? You, with your soft skin and broken bones? I believe I can try." Cyrillith studied her for a long moment. Then she turned to face her mate, Vithorn. The alpha dragon did not respond. "Vithorn, look at me." Slowly, he turned. His golden eyes met his mate's red ones, and something passed between them that needed no words. "I will not lose them," Cyrillith said. "I will not lose another clutch to this ice. Not when there is a chance. Not when someone is willing to fight for them. The shame, I do not care about shame." Cyrillith's voice cracked for the first time. "I care about my children. Our children. If this human can bring them back to me, then I will carry whatever shame the galaxy wants to give us. I will carry it gladly." Vithorn closed his eyes. The other pack members watched in silence, not daring to speak. Finally, Vithorn opened his eyes and looked at Kira. "If you fail," he said slowly, "if you make things worse, if you cause more of the cave to collapse, I will kill you. Do you understand this?" Kira nodded. "And we will not help you. We cannot fit in those tunnels. Whatever you do alone. I understand." Vithorn stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside, clearing the path to the collapsed cave entrance. "Then go, human. Show us what your soft species is capable of." Kira did not waste time with words. She walked toward the cave, her legs unsteady but her steps determined. She pulled out her thermal cutter and her emergency light. She looked at the narrow gap between the fallen rocks, barely wide enough for her shoulders. Behind her, the wind began to pick up. A blizzard was coming. She could see the wall of white moving across the ice fields in the distance. She had maybe an hour before the entrance was completely sealed by snow. Kira took one last breath of open air. Then she squeezed into the darkness and began to crawl. Behind her, the Draconith watched in silence as the smallest creature they had ever seen disappeared into the mountain to save the children they could not reach. Swirlith pressed her body against the cave entrance, as close as she could get without causing more collapse, and she waited. The darkness inside the collapsed cave was complete. Kira's emergency light cut a thin beam through the black, revealing walls of compressed ice and shattered stone pressing in from all sides. The tunnel she was crawling through had not existed before the collapse. It was just a narrow gap between fallen rocks, barely wide enough for her body to fit through. She moved forward on her elbows and knees, pushing her equipment bag ahead of her. Every movement sent pain shooting through her broken arm. The cold was already seeping through her damaged thermal suit, numbing her fingers and toes. She could hear her own breathing echoing off the ice, too loud in the silence. The scanner showed the life signs about 40 meters ahead and 12 meters down. In open ground, that would take her 2 minutes to walk. In this maze of collapsed stone, it might take hours. If she made it at all, Kira pushed the thought away and kept moving. The first major obstacle came after 10 meters. A massive slab of ice had fallen at an angle, creating a gap so narrow she had to exhale completely and squeeze through sideways. The ice scraped against her back and chest, tearing at her suit. For one terrible moment, she got stuck, her hips wedged between the frozen walls. Panic rose in her throat. She closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe slowly. Then she twisted her body, found a slightly wider angle, and pulled herself through. She fell forward into a small open space and lay there gasping for a moment. "Keep moving," she told herself. "They are waiting for you." She checked her thermal cutter. The battery was at 60%. It would not last long in this cold. She would have to be careful. Use it only when absolutely necessary. The tunnel split into 3 directions ahead. Kira checked her scanner and took the left path, the one angling downward toward the life signs. The ceiling was lower here, forcing her to crawl flat on her stomach. Ice crystals hung from the rock above, dripping water onto her back that immediately froze at 20 meters. She found the first egg. It was not one of the living ones. The shell was cracked open, the inside dark and empty. The cold had killed it within hours of the collapse. There had been nothing anyone could do. Kira touched the broken shell gently and whispered, "I am sorry." Then she moved on. The second dead egg was nearby, half buried under a pile of loose stone. Kira did not stop this time. She could not afford to. The living eggs needed her more than the dead ones needed her grief. At 30 meters, her thermal cutter died. The battery, drained by the extreme cold, simply stopped working. Kira pressed the activation button again and again, but nothing happened. The tool that was supposed to help her cut through ice was now just dead weight in her bag. She sat in the darkness for a moment, a light flickering, and considered her options. She could go back. She could tell the Draconith that she had tried but failed, that the equipment had not been enough, that she was sorry. And then what? Watch 5 more eggs die because she gave up? Kira put the useless thermal cutter aside and looked at her hands. They were already red and raw from the cold. The skin on her fingers was cracking. She began to dig with her bare hands. The ice was hard, packed tight by the pressure of the collapse. Every handful she scraped away revealed more ice beneath. Her fingernails broke. Her knuckles bled. The blood froze almost immediately, creating a thin red layer on the ice in front of her. She did not stop. Above ground. The blizzard had arrived. Vithern stood at the edge of the storm, watching the wall of white snow bury the cave entrance completely. The wind screamed around him, but he did not move. His eyes were fixed on the place where the human had disappeared. "She is dead by now," one of the younger pack members said. "Nothing could survive in there." Vithern did not respond. Sci-Fi pressed herself against the blocked entrance, her ear against the ice. She had been listening for hours, straining to hear any sound from inside. "I hear something," she said suddenly. The other dragons moved closer. "What is it?" Vithern asked. Syrlit was quiet for a long moment, listening. Then her expression changed to something the others had never seen before: confusion, wonder, disbelief. "She is singing," Syrlit said. Deep inside the mountain. Kira had reached the nesting chamber. It was a small space, maybe 3 meters across, protected by a natural arch of stone that had held during the collapse. The 5 surviving eggs were clustered together in the center, their shells intact, their surfaces cold but not frozen solid. Kira crawled toward them, her hands leaving bloody prints on the ice. Her light was almost dead now, flickering in and out. She could barely feel her fingers anymore, but she could see them. She could see the eggs. She reached out and touched the nearest one. It was large, almost half her size, covered in scales that were soft and flexible. Through the shell, she could feel movement. Something was alive in there, shifting, waiting. "Hello," Kira whispered. "I am here now. You are not alone." She knew they could not understand her. They were not even hatched yet. But she talked to them anyway, because the silence was too heavy, and because she needed to hear something other than her own breathing. She pulled off her thermal jacket, the last layer of protection she had, and wrapped it around the cluster of eggs. Then she pressed her body against them, curving herself around their shapes, sharing whatever warmth she had left. "My brother used to sing to me when I was scared," she said, her voice barely a whisper now. "When the storms came on the colony and the power went out, he would sit with me and sing until the lights came back on." She began to sing. It was an old song, a lullaby from Earth that her mother had taught her. The words were simple and the melody was soft, and it felt strange singing it here in this frozen tomb so far from home. But Kira sang anyway, her voice cracking from the cold, her breath coming in shallow clouds. She sang for the eggs. She sang for Catan. She sang because it was the only thing she had left to give. Above her, through tons of ice and stone, the Draconith listened. They could not make out the words, but they heard the melody, faint and broken and impossibly human, drifting up from the darkness below. And for the first time in his long life, Vithern felt something he could not name. Kira had stopped feeling the cold. That was a bad sign. She knew it was a bad sign. When the body stopped feeling cold, it meant the body was giving up, shutting down the nerves to save energy for the vital organs. It meant death was not far away, but she could not move. The eggs needed her warmth, and she had nothing else to give them. Her light had died an hour ago. She lay in complete darkness now, curled around the 5 eggs, her body pressed against their shells. She could feel them moving inside, gentle shifts and turns that told her they were still alive, still fighting, still waiting for a world they had never seen. "You have to hold on," she whispered to them. "Just a little longer. Your parents are up there. They are waiting for you. They love you so much." One of the eggs moved more than the others. Kira felt it shifting against her chest, the shell bulging outward in small pulses. Something was happening inside. She placed her hand on the shell and felt a crack forming beneath her fingers. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, you are coming. You are actually coming." The crack spread slowly across the surface of the egg. Kira could hear small scratching sounds from inside, tiny claws working at the shell. She wanted to help, wanted to tear the shell open and pull the hatchling out, but she knew she could not. This was something the baby had to do on its own. This was how it was supposed to be. She pressed her forehead against the egg and spoke softly. "You can do it. Come on, little one. Break through. I am right here." A piece of shell fell away, then another. Then a small snout pushed through the opening, covered in wet scales that gleamed even in the darkness. Kira could not see the color, but she could feel the texture, smooth and soft and impossibly delicate. The hatchling struggled for several minutes, working its way out of the shell bit by bit. Kira guided it gently with her numb fingers, catching it as it finally tumbled free. It was tiny, smaller than she had expected. Maybe the size of a house cat, though shaped completely differently, with folded wings pressed against its sides and a long tail that curled around her wrist. It made a small sound, something between a chirp and a growl, and pressed itself against her chest. It was cold. So cold, shivering in her arms. Kira opened her shirt and placed the hatchling against her bare skin, over her heart. It was the only warmth she had left. The tiny dragon nestled against her, its head tucking under her chin, and slowly stopped shivering. Its heartbeat matched hers. Fast at first, then gradually slower, calmer. "There you go," Kira whispered. "There you go. You are safe now." She knew she was probably dying. Her body felt strange and distant, like it belonged to someone else. But the hatchling was warm against her chest, and the other eggs were still pressed against her sides. And somehow that made everything feel like it was worth it. She closed her eyes, above ground. Vithan could not stand still anymore. He paced back and forth in front of the buried cave entrance, his claws leaving deep gouges in the ice. The blizzard had passed, but the entrance was completely sealed now, buried under meters of fresh snow. "We should dig," he said suddenly. The other pack members looked at him in surprise. "You said we could not risk it," one of them said. "You said the tunnel would collapse." "I know what I said." Vithorn's voice was rough, strained. "But she has been down there for 12 hours. No sound for the last 3. Either she is dead or she is dying, and I cannot." He stopped, his great body trembling with something that might have been rage or might have been something else entirely. Cyrillith moved to his side. "Then we dig," she said. Vithorn looked at her. "Together," she added. "All of us. If the tunnel collapses, we dig through the collapse. If it collapses again, we dig through that too. We dig until we reach them or until there is nothing left to reach." She turned to face the rest of the pack. This human went into the dark alone to save our children. She did not know if she would survive. She did not ask for payment or honor or recognition. She simply went. Cyrillith's voice grew stronger. "I do not care what the galaxy thinks of us. I do not care about tradition or shame or any of it. I care about those eggs. And I care about the creature who is dying down there trying to save them." She looked at Vithorn. "What do we do?" Vithorn was silent for a moment. Then he turned to face the buried entrance and raised his claws. "We dig," he said. The pack moved as one. 7 Draconith attacked the wall of ice and stone with everything they had. Their claws tore through snow and frozen rock. Their fire breath melted the thickest ice. They worked without stopping, without resting, without speaking. The sound of their digging echoed across the empty ice fields like thunder. Other species across the galaxy would have laughed if they could see it. The proud Draconith, the ancient ones who bowed to no one, digging through a mountain for a single human female. It was absurd. It was impossible. But no one was laughing because somewhere deep in that mountain, buried under tons of ice, a small heartbeat was still fighting to stay alive, and the dragons could hear it. Vithorn dug until his mises claws cracked and bled. He did not stop. He could not stop. With every meter of ice he cleared, he could hear that heartbeat getting closer. Faint and slow, but there. Still there. "I am coming," he growled into the stone. "Hold on, human. I am coming." Below, in the darkness of the nesting chamber, Kira was drifting in and out of consciousness. The hatchling was still pressed against her chest, its small body warm against her fading heartbeat. The other eggs surrounded her, silent and waiting. She heard something. A distant rumble, scratching, the sound of stone breaking far above. She opened her eyes, though there was nothing to see. "They are coming," she whispered to the hatchling. "Do you hear that? Your family is coming for you." The hatchling chirped softly in response. Kira smiled in the darkness and held it closer. "Just a little longer," she said. "Just a little longer." Then she closed her eyes again and let the darkness take her. The last thing she heard before she lost consciousness was the sound of claws breaking through ice. Getting closer, closer, and then light. Blinding. Brilliant light pouring into the chamber as a massive claw tore through the wall. Vithorn's golden eyes appeared in the opening, wild and desperate and full of something that looked almost like fear. "Human," he roared. "Human, answer me." But Kira did not answer. She lay still in the center of the chamber, curled around 5 eggs and 1 newborn hatchling, her body cold and unmoving. And for one terrible moment, Vithorn thought he was too late. Vithorn pushed through the opening he had torn in the ice, his massive body barely fitting into the small chamber. His eyes adjusted to the darkness, and what he saw made him freeze completely. The human female lay in the center of the room, her body curved around the 5 eggs like a protective shell. Her skin was pale blue from the cold. Her lips were cracked and bloodless. Her hands were raw and torn, frozen blood covering her fingers and pressed against her chest. Nestled under her chin was a newborn hatchling. "Cyrillith," Vithorn called back through the tunnel. "Come quickly." Cyrillith squeezed through the opening seconds later. When she saw the eggs, whole and undamaged, she made a sound that was half sob and half roar. She rushed forward and pressed her snout against each shell, feeling the movement inside, confirming what she had been afraid to hope. "They are alive," she breathed. "They are all alive." Then she saw the hatchling against Kira's chest. The tiny dragon was awake, its eyes open, looking up at its mother. But it did not move toward her. It stayed pressed against the human, its small claws gripping her torn shirt, its head tucked under her chin. The human... Cyrillith started. "She is still breathing," Vithorn said. He had lowered his head to Kira's face, feeling the faint warmth of her breath against his scales. "Barely. We need to get her out of here now." They worked quickly. Cyrillith gathered the eggs, carrying them gently in her claws, while Vithorn lifted Kira's body with more care than he had ever shown anything in his life. The hatchling refused to let go of her. It clung to her chest and growled when Vithorn tried to separate them. "Leave it," Cyrillith said. "The child has chosen. We do not break that bond." They carried her out through the tunnel, back into the open air, back into the pale light of the Varathka sun. The other pack members gathered around, their eyes wide as they saw the eggs, the hatchling, and the broken human who had saved them all. Kira was not conscious. Her heartbeat was faint and getting fainter. Her body temperature was far below what any human could survive. "She will die," one of the younger dragons said quietly. "Her kind cannot survive this cold. There is nothing we can do." Vithorn looked down at the small creature in his claws. This fragile thing, this soft, weak, impossible thing that had crawled through the darkness and bled into the ice to save children that were not her own. "Then we warm her," he said. He lay down on the ice and curled his massive body around Kira, wrapping his wings over her like a blanket. His natural body heat, the fire that burned inside every Draconith, began to radiate outward. Cyrillith joined him, pressing her body against his, adding her warmth. One by one, the other pack members did the same. 7 massive dragons formed a circle around one small human, their bodies creating a cocoon of heat in the frozen wasteland. The hatchling stayed on Kira's chest, adding its own tiny warmth to the effort. They stayed like that for hours. As the sun moved across the gray sky, Kira's heartbeat grew stronger. Her breathing deepened. The color slowly returned to her face, and when her eyes finally opened, the first thing she saw was a ring of golden and silver dragon eyes looking down at her with something that no Draconith had ever shown a human before. Respect. Over the following days, the other eggs hatched one by one. Each newborn emerged into a world where a human female sat among their pack, wrapped in dragon scales and watching over them with tired but happy eyes. The hatchlings learned her scent alongside their parents' scent. They crawled over her lap and curled up against her warmth and made small sounds of contentment. The first hatchling, the one who had been born in the darkness, never left her side. A galactic authority vessel arrived on the 10th day. They had received the distress signal from Akira's crash shuttle and had come to retrieve her. When they saw a human woman sitting among a Draconeth pack, surrounded by hatchlings, they did not know what to think. "We are here to take you home," the rescue team leader said carefully. Kira looked at Vithern, then at Cyrillith, then at the small hatchling pressed against her leg. "I think I am home," she said quietly. Vithern stepped forward, placing himself between Kira and the rescue team. His massive form blocked out the light. "This human is Kethrin Sol," he announced. His voice carried across the ice field, strong and clear. "It is a title that has never been given to one outside our kind. It means Fireheart, who carries young. She risked her life for our children when she had nothing to gain and everything to lose." He looked back at Kira. "She belongs to this pack now, if she wishes it. And we do not give up what belongs to us." The rescue team looked at each other uncertainly. "Ma'am?" the leader asked. "Is this what you want?" Kira stood up slowly. Her hands were bandaged, her body still weak from her time in the ice. But her eyes were clear. "I would like to stay," she said. "At least for a while. There is still so much I want to learn. So much I want to see." She looked down at the hatchling by her side. "And I think this little one would miss me if I left." The hatchling chirped in agreement. The rescue team left without her. Word spread quickly across the galaxy. The story of the human who had dug through a mountain with her bare hands to save Draconid eggs became legend. Other species who had dismissed humans as weak and fragile began to look at them differently. Soft meat, they had called them. But soft meat did not crawl through the darkness for children, not their own. Soft meat did not bleed into the ice and sing lullabies to eggs in a frozen tomb. Soft meat did not lie down to die with a newborn hatchling pressed against their heart. Humans were something else, entirely. Years passed. Kira stayed on Verithka, serving as the first human ambassador to the Draconith homeworld. She learned their language, their customs, their history. She helped build bridges between species that had never spoken before. The first hatchling grew into a young dragon, strong and proud, with scales that shimmered blue and silver in the light. Kira named him Katten, after the brother she had lost long ago. He never forgot the heartbeat that had kept him alive in the darkness. He never left her side. One evening, as the pale sun set over the ice fields, Kira sat at the edge of the pack's territory with Katten beside her. He was nearly as large as she was now, his wings folded against his back, his head resting on her lap. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. His voice was young but deep, already carrying the rumble of his ancestors. "Staying here instead of going back to your own kind?" Kira smiled and ran her hand over his scales. "My own kind," she repeated softly. Cadden, I learned something in that cave. I learned that family is not about blood or species or where you were born. Family is about who you are willing to die for, who you would crawl through the darkness to save. She looked out at the pack gathered in the distance. The young ones playing in the snow, Vithern and Cyrillith watching over them with pride. This is my family now, she said. This is where I belong. Cadden pressed closer to her, his warmth wrapping around her like it had on that first night when he was small and cold and new to the world. And in that moment, on a frozen world at the edge of the galaxy, a human and a dragon watched the sun go down together, not as two different species, but as mother and son.